What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about our favorite hobby, video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 6. We're cruising along, covering lots of good topics, and I'm having a good time, and I hope you guys are enjoying this show as well. Now, first off, I want to say thank you for the support last week. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as we discussed Square Enix. Again, I still find it just absolutely fascinating, and hopefully made some good points and opened up some minds out there. And also, I hope you're doing well. Spring is here. You know, here in the Pacific Northwest, we're getting some warmer weather, and it's been awesome. And actually, because of it, I'm recording this episode much later than I would have liked to, a couple days later. I actually recorded on a Sunday, so this will go live tomorrow. Normally I do it, Friday, Saturday. So a little bit later than usual, but that's because I wanted to get outside. I went outside with my son, did some golfing, and that stuff. So it is what it is, but hope you're all doing well out there. And if it's nice and sunny where you are, hope you're getting some vitamin D and enjoying that beautiful sunshine. Now, for the uninitiated, the best way you can support the show, and is always appreciated, is to leave a comment and rate the podcast on whatever platform you're consuming it on. Also, you can join our community over on Locals. That's the Gamecite chronicles.locals.com. It's a really cool website, nice alternative to the likes of Patreon and those types of things. And that's eventually where I'd like to, once we kind of foster a community over there, kind of take some audience-driven questions over there. So head on over there, check it out. I'd love to see your faces over there. And lastly, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast so you can stay up to date with the content. Now, for this week's show, I thought we'd spice it up a little bit and do kind of a fun topic, and that is talking about critical games that I haven't played. And what I mean by that is games that are either have a huge cult following or are just critical darlings, critical and likely commercial darlings out there that I've just over the years never got to playing. So I think it's fun. So I've put together a list of 10 games that I have not played. So we'll discuss those. We'll go through those, share that list, and then I'd love to hear from you guys. There's also a couple news items I want to touch in as well. And then, of course, we'll talk about what games I've been playing. So, first, let's dive into a couple of those news items before we get into the games that we're playing. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was the Ghostbusters reveal. So there's a new Ghostbusters game out there. If you haven't heard about it, it's called Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed. They revealed it early this week. I want to say it was like Monday or Tuesday. Kind of woke up to the news and watched the trailer. And this is developed by Illphonic. So if that studio sounds familiar, it's because they also did Friday the 13th and the PlayStation exclusive Predator Hunting Grounds. I think both those games kind of had nice followings, mostly Friday the 13th. That was kind of a nice phenomenon for a while, especially on Twitch. I know a lot of people stream that. Some still do as well. So it's unsurprisingly, the game is along those lines of their predecessors. So that doesn't surprise me too much. And this is a game that's coming out later this year, slated for holiday 2020. And like I mentioned, like the Friday the 13th and Predator Hunting Grounds game, it is an asymmetrical 4v1 multiplayer game where players will either be a team of 4 in the Ghostbusters, or you'll play a ghost who will try to take down the Ghostbusters and vice versa. So it's got that kind of signature Illphonic asymmetric multiplayer. And then you can customize your characters. You can prepare for missions at the firehouse, which sounds absolutely awesome. And then they also mentioned that Ernie Hudson is back. So the voice of Winston Zedmore is back. And that's super awesome. I love it. And one thing that really, really made me happy is that one of the articles I was reading up on this said you can also play solo against AI. And I've talked about it in the past, but if you know me, I'm not big on multiplayer games. So having the ability to kind of just play it by myself is fantastic. Now with this reveal, I got to say I'm pretty excited. I was very excited. I liked what I saw because the game's showing off like a first-person Ghostbuster perspective. And I think that is just fantastic. I love it. It's never been done before. I am all for it. And I gotta say this. I gotta preface this that I am a lifelong Ghostbusters fan. Ever since I was a little kid in the early 90s, just loving the Ghostbusters. Like I watched the cartoon, I watched the movies over and over. I had all the toys, like the proton pack, the trap, all that stuff. And I actually still have my original trap and the part of the gun of the proton pack still to this day. And it's actually kind of awesome because my son has actually been playing with the gun from my original Ghostbusters toy, and he knows what Ghostbusters is. And my grandma actually made me a Ghostbusters jumpsuit as a kid. So like I was all in. That was my jam. And I also got to say that, you know, I think the first Ghostbusters movie is probably my favorite movie of all time. It's one of those movies that I could just watch over and over and over again. And back in 2014, it was my first time actually going to PAX West up in Seattle. That was I believe it was the 30th, and it was like I think it was the 30th anniversary of Ghostbusters being released, because it was released in 1984. And so they re-released it in theaters, and actually when we were up there that first night, it was at one of the theaters in downtown Seattle. And so I was like, we had nothing else really going on. So I was like, I want to go see this. So I've seen the original Ghostbusters theater, albeit 30 years later, in the movie theaters. And it was awesome. Such a cool experience. I loved it. I love that movie. I love the Ghostbusters. And I got to say this, that the original Ghostbusters game, or not the original Ghostbusters game, but the 2009 Ghostbusters game, it was called Ghostbusters the video game. I think it was by Atari. I think Atari published it or something like that. And then they remastered it, brought it back in 2019 to Xbox One and PS4. And that game is awesome. By the way, if you've never played that game, it is heralded as like the third Ghostbusters movie, and this is pre-Ghostbusters Afterlife, that recent one that just came out. And it has the original cast, so Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, rest in peace, Bill Murray, and Ernie Hudson, reprising all of their original Ghostbusters roles. And you just played through this campaign. They kind of rehashed some of the stuff from the first movie, which, you know, is what it is. But it was great. And if I'm not mistaken, that game was also written by Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd too, which is so cool. Like I love that game. And one thing I actually really liked about it, which again, I'll bring it back to the multiplayer new Ghostbusters game, is that the Ghostbusters video game had multiplayer in it back on the 360 and PS3. And that multiplayer was fantastic. Like it was freaking awesome. And I played the crap out of it. And basically what you do is you go on missions with other players online, and you'd capture ghosts for money, and you'd either compete to see who can get the most money or capture the most ghosts, or you'd kind of do it cooperatively to, you know, do different challenges and stuff like that. And one of my buddies, Greg, shout out to Greg, if you're listening, appreciate you, man. Him and I used to play online for the Ghostbusters game, and we just fell in love with it. Like it was just so much fun. And I was so disappointed because in 2019, when the remastered came out, it did not come with the online component. And the developers at the time had said, yeah, we're still working out some of the online multiplayer components. That'll come later. And then they just went blackout. Media black. Never saw or heard from them again. So it'll probably, it's been 3 years later? Well, two and a half years later. So we'll never get that, which sucks because that multiplayer was fantastic. So with that, I'm excited for this Ghostbuster Spirit Unleashed reveal. Though, again, I'm not big on those asymmetrical multiplayer games, kind of the 4v1 thing. I'm excited to play, you know, by myself or maybe just team up with some randoms just to try it out. But one of the things that I'd love to see with this game, I don't think we're going to get it, but I'd love to see it, is some sort of like single player campaign. But of course, I'd love that. That'd be awesome. I don't think we're getting that because the other Ilphonic's other games don't have that. But when I was watching the trailer for the first time, I was kind of thinking to myself that because of the first person perspective, and you know, you're kind of going through halls, corridors in these places as you're kind of hunting down ghosts. I kind of got, and it reminded me of like Rainbow Six Extraction, that latest Rainbow Six game that came out. It's PvE. You and two other of your teammates will go, and you kind of go on missions, and you're taking down aliens and stuff like that. And so I was thinking like that concept I think would really work well for a Ghostbusters game like this, like what we're seeing, first person perspective. You go on missions to go track down different ghosts, and it's like a PvE experience. I just think that would be phenomenal, especially in the first person perspective. I love that. Just you got your proton charger, you're throwing out traps, you're capturing ghosts. You get to level up your character, and maybe even get to tweak out the car at the firehouse. Like, it just sounds freaking amazing. And I don't think we're getting that level of detail, but I think with this license, I think you have potential to do more than just, your typical style of game that they've done in the past, that 4v1 multiplayer. But nonetheless, we'll wait and see if it's more than just that. I'm not holding my hopes up, but I think there's potential here. I was excited for the reveal, and I'm definitely keeping my eye on this one because I want to try it out. I'm going to buy it. It looks great, and it should be coming out later this year. So let me know what you guys think about that. Ghostbusters Spirits Unleashed from IllFonic. I dig it. Now, the other thing I wanted to touch on is the Halo TV series. That premiered this past week on March 24th, so I think this past Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, on Paramount Plus. And it's kind of been interesting to watch this come out, see fan reactions to it, especially gamers, non-gamers, all the like, and kind of see how it's doing. And I want to get into that, but first I want to point out that this has been a long time coming. And in my opinion, a bit late, because the original Halo on the original Xbox came out in 2001, and it is now 2022. So we're 20 years later, we're now getting this cross media TV show, especially the state that Halo's in, albeit Halo Infinite I think has revitalized a lot that 343 has lost over the years with Halo 4 and 5, but I still think it's not where it needs to be, albeit it is still an important franchise for Microsoft and Xbox. But I did want to cover a little bit of history about the Halo and this TV series, because this has been a long time coming. So I did some research, and IGN had a great article kind of covering this. So I got this from IGN, but there were original movie talks all the way back in 2005. So this process of getting Halo, the franchise, onto the screen really started back in 2005. And it was stated that Microsoft they shopped it around once they kind of got a good script and everything to different movie studios, but the terms that they wanted for the deal was apparently too aggressive, and none of the movie studios would agree to them. So that kind of shot that down. And then, if you recall, back in 2013, a TV series was announced, and they said Spielberg was tied to the project. And I think they did this at E3, if I'm not mistaken. So E3 2013, alongside, that was also when the Xbox One was being revealed and talked about. So that was very, very big news. And I know a lot of people were hyped about that. Again, that's still so long ago. I mean, that was 9 years ago at this point, almost. And yeah, so it's taken a long time. And so I know that's had I think director changes, writer changes. They couldn't land on the story and all the like. Like, I know it's been a troubled development. And then now it's here. So again, back in 2005 is when the movie talks started. It didn't come to fruition. And then this TV series was originally announced back in 2013. And I believe, if I recall correctly, it was announced for Stars, that network. But that obviously never happened. And then eventually found a home at Paramount Plus here recently. But it's here, and it's really hit and miss, I think, with a lot of folks. And looking at the Rotten Tomatoes scores, which is always interesting because you again, like Metacritic, you can see the critic score and then the user score. But I gotta say, looking at them, and I looked at this yesterday at the time of this recording, the critic score is sitting at 60 and the user score is at 61. And I think that user score has kind of been going down, if I'm not mistaken. So, because it was higher at one point. So, not that great, but not as bad as it could be, I guess. So it's kind of sitting there in the middle. I think what's being provoked from this TV series is really kind of a mixed reaction. And I think one of the big things about this, actually, there's two main things. I think the first thing, and probably the biggest thing about the Halo TV series, it's kind of causing some drama, I guess, for lack of a better term, about this show, is that it's been reported that the creative team, as they were getting prepared to launch the show here, and this happened probably in the last maybe 2 weeks, articles and news reports were coming out about this, that the creative team behind this series on Paramount Plus that just launched didn't even look at the games. And it stated that they wanted to focus on the characters and not just recreate the game. And those statements, I think, is what's really sparking controversy with fans. And when I hear that just I'm of the mind to, like, really, like, that's not good news in my opinion. That tells me a lot of what I need to know about this show. Because you see this a lot in comics, in the comic book industry, especially as of lately, where you get these writers and these creative teams that get on these projects and they take the property and they don't treat it with the respect that the fans would. And when you have diehard fans, especially with big franchises like Halo, like Star Wars, I'll throw Star Wars in there. I'm a big Star Wars fan myself, a lifelong Star Wars fan. And then, some of the Marvel properties and some of those characters, they just aren't treated with respect because they don't pay attention to the history and the lore of the series or the franchise. There's no care for it. They just disregard it, and then they do whatever they want. Now, on one hand, I can understand as a creative, sure, you can do whatever you want and tell whatever story you want, I guess. I don't necessarily buy that because in these particular instances, because you're using a licensed property. Now, if you're creating something entirely new, then yeah, you can do whatever the heck you want. But when you're taking some sort of property and building a show around it or trying to tell a story around it, you would think it's critical to understand the history and the lore. So to hear that this creative team didn't even bother to look at the games or take the games, let alone, I don't know, I can't tell you how many Halo books are out there as well. All this history and lore that they have around Halo and the love and devotion that the fan base has for the Halo series, to not even take that into consideration just blows my mind and tells me that this is not going to follow the games, which that's also been reported. Not that it needs to, but it's not going to adhere to kind of the rules that's already been laid out, I guess, around Halo, is a better way to say that. And they're going to just do whatever they want. They're going to tell whatever story they want and use the property to tell a story. And not to get too political, but this happens a lot in where things get politicized. You see, especially in comics, like comics is the greatest example, where you see characters that are tokenized or gender bent or race swapped for the sake of being race swapped or gender bent to fit that kind of diversity quota. And rather than respect the lore and treat the characters with respect and tell stories within those confines, or if they want to be, in quotes, inclusive or diverse, then go make new characters. There's nothing wrong with that. But it seems like a lot of these people are just so creatively bankrupt that they need to take a franchise, twist it, disregard all the history, and tell whatever story they want to push whatever political message or that they want. And again, I'm not saying that's what Halo's doing specifically, but you see this a lot where you get these creative teams that don't give a shit about the lore of these franchises. And just kind of seeing that controversy kind of play out and hearing how it's being reported just does not leave me optimistic for this series. Now, I do want to watch it. And one of the cool things I think Microsoft is doing right now is they're running a special where you get 30 days free of Paramount Plus if you're an Xbox Live member. I can't remember if it's just Gold tier or Game Pass or whatever, but it'll pop up in your profile. So I do want to do that and, watch some of the series, see if it's something I'll like. But I'm not optimistic, kind of hearing that going in. The other controversy, or controversial thing I should say, with the Halo TV series is that Master Chief reportedly takes his helmet off and right away in episode 1. And that's a big thing. That's one of the big things about the games is that you never see his face. Like as an adult, there's been some flashbacks where you can kind of see his face. And if you read the books, I believe his face is described in great detail. So you kind of, you know what the character looks like. But I think one of the great things about the Halo franchise that I think is artistically done well is that you do never see his face. It's kind of left up to the imagination. And I really like that because it even though you generally know what Master Chief looks like, it still leaves a little bit of mystery there, kind of for interpretation. And because these are first-person shooter games, it lets you almost be that avatar, kind of almost put yourself into Master Chief. Yes, Master Chief is his own character, but you are a part of him when you're playing the game. And not having that character's face defined and revealed, I think is part of that kind of plays into that. And the TV show right off the bat is just gonna, hey, there's Master Chief and there's his face and he's this character and blah. I don't know. Those two things, it's just not off to a good start in my opinion. And I love Halo. I've been playing those games ever since the first one came out of the original Xbox. Me and one of my best friends in high school we'd play through the Halo campaign, and then Halo 2. Me and my best friends, like we would have just all night Halo 2 sessions, just playing multiplayer against each other. It was freaking awesome. And then Halo 3 obviously is when it all just online, and good times with Halo. Like I love that series. It's awesome. And I've read, I think it was the Reach book or one of the books I've read them that goes into Master Chief's history and stuff like that. And I feel like that's what you could do with the Halo show. Like you don't need to tell this weird story and make up this new background or in this universe. Like you have so much lore to work with and really cool stories. Like I think it'd be cool to, if you really want to make Master Chief a character and characterize him, then like there's tons of that. Like how Master Chief became a Spartan, kind of give insight into the Spartan program. And then, before the events of Halo, the first game, he went on tons of missions and he had a squad and all that stuff. Like you can go into that and kind of showcase some of those stories and talk about those events. Like that would be awesome. I think that would be great fodder for a TV series. But nonetheless, we got the Halo TV series is here. It is what it is, albeit very controversial with a lot of fans out there. Like I said, I do want to check it out. I think I'm going to wait a few weeks till a few more episodes come out because they are doing weekly releases. And so I don't want to sign up for another subscription service. So I kind of want to get as many episodes in as I can with that free 30 days. So I'm going to wait to try to redeem that and then, check it out. So I'll report back on it when I do, but let me know what you got. If you've watched the Halo TV series, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, get your take on it because this is a very interesting one that I think, again, has sparked some controversy amongst fans. And though some people can say if you can kind of get over some of that stuff, then it's good. And it seems like some of the action shots are good and things like that. But I don't know. From the trailers, but from what I've seen, I feel like it's going to be almost kind of a bait and switch in terms of they're really going to focus on the planet and kind of that village that are being attacked by the Covenant, more than they're going to focus on Master Chief, which is not what I'm looking for in a Halo show, but who knows? We'll see. I do want to give it a try. Like I said, I will give it a try. But let me know what you think about the Halo TV series down in the comments below. And I'll report on soon in the coming weeks once I finally dive into it. So with those out of the way, let's get into some of the games I've been playing. So since last week, I've continued Horizon Forbidden West. I'm still continuing the story, and I'm starting to reach I think the penultimate, the climax of the main story. I think I'm about to get there. So nothing else to really report. It's still great. It's still beautiful. I'm excited to see it through. But the other game I've been playing is actually really taken up most of my gaming time here lately, and that's Returnal. I've gotten back into Returnal. So as we talked about briefly last week, the update, the 3.0 update with the Ascension DLC came out this past week, and I put it in, I updated it, and I had every intention of going in and like, let's go to the tower and play through that. But I got sacked back into the regular game and trying to clean up some trophies. And so if you recall, one of the crappy things that I think really hurt Returnal on its launch is that trophies were broken. So I've beaten the game. I played all the way through it, beaten all the bosses, pretty sure I did all 3 acts and all that stuff, went through all the biomes, all that stuff. And I only got a handful of trophies. Like not all the boss trophies popped, not the acts, the story-based or act-based trophies didn't pop for me. And I didn't realize at the time I was playing it, but I'm actually kind of bummed about that. And that really bugs me because I did beat this game and I want the trophies to show for it, but they never popped for me. And I thought with some of the later updates, they would retroactively do that, but that doesn't retroactively work for all of the trophies. So with that, I was like, well, maybe I can clean up some and see if it's hard to get this platinum. So I've kind of gotten sucked back into it and trying to clean those up and doing the surveys. And I kind of want to go through and get those last, refight some of those bosses that I missed those trophies for, which I think really I'm only missing 2. The boss in Biome 3 and the boss in Biome 6, I think are the 2 ones that I'm missing. Of course, some of the harder bosses. So that's what I've been doing. And I got to say, man, this game is awesome. Like I understand its criticisms, especially at launch. And I understand that it's not going to be a game for everyone because it is certainly difficult and it's not your typical roguelike style of game, like a Hades or Dead Cells or something like that. But it's so damn good. It's addictive too. Like I don't know, I just find the combat so satisfying. Like it's got that classic Housemarque touch with that arcade style of combat. It's fast paced, it's satisfying. And one of the other things that I think is really good about this game, I mean, I think it's visually impressive. It looks great, runs great. Very few frame drops in my experience. But the sound design, I think, is really, really well done, especially if you're wearing headphones. Like it's got that very kind of almost retro style of sci-fi sounds like you'd expect from like Aliens. And the atmosphere is just phenomenal. Like I don't know, again, if you're playing with headphones, you got that very science fiction, classic sci-fi sounds going on. And you're just navigating through these worlds and these levels or biomes as they're called in the game, and it's just such a great experience. Definitely still frustrating at times. There's been a few moments where I died. Like I was having a good run and then I just get slaughtered. And it took me a while too to kind of remember some of the mechanics and the different items in the game and what they work, how the weapons work. But I've gotten back into it and I am just addicted. I'm addicted. Like that's all I can think about. Like that's another one of the reasons I've put recording this podcast off this week is because I've been trying to fit in as much time as I can to play Returnal. So it's captured me again. I want to continue playing with it. I do want to try out the DLC, the Ascension, the Tower, to try back into that. But again, I do want to clean up some of those trophies. I don't think I'm gonna get them all before I try the Tower, but there's a few of them I want to clean up before I go on and take the Tower. But it's so good. It's such a great game, and I would definitely recommend it to someone who's looking for that. And I think one of the things I like about it is it's one of those games where you can kind of pop in, do part of a run or do a run and then pop back out. And it just, I don't know, it's hitting an itch for me and I'm absolutely loving it. So be playing more of that, probably continue with Horizon and Returnal for a little bit, but so good. So damn good. And okay, let's dive into the main topic for this week's episode, albeit we're almost 30 minutes in, but it's a podcast. That's what happens. And that is what critical games that I haven't played. And like I said at the start of the show, I think this is a fun topic to dive into because it's just one of those things where everyone has games that they might not have gotten to or just weren't interested at the time like it released, or they were too busy doing something else, or whatever the reason is, because there's a multitude of reasons. Maybe someone didn't get to a game, and they're games that you just keep hearing things about, or a lot of people still talk about or remember so fondly that you're like, man, I never got to experience that. I would love to try that. I want to play it. And that's kind of how I put this list together. So this is a list of 10 games that either had some form of critical or commercial success or some sort of cult following, that are beloved games that people just love and they've talked about. And anytime it's brought up, people just gush about them. And they're games that I've just never gotten around to playing. One of the reasons I like this topic is it does add a little bit of vulnerability. You kind of put yourself out there, because inevitably there's always, someone online who's like, oh, you're not a real gamer if you haven't played this game. And, everyone's got different tastes and preferences and stuff like that. And so not everyone can play every single game. I mean, for myself, I've mentioned this in the past, but, I've got a job, I've got my, a family, my son, lots of real life obligations that take away from my time with gaming, as well as, there's other hobbies that I pursue. And I think it's always good to kind of have some sort of analog hobby. Like I mentioned golf. Like I love playing golf. I've really taken up golf here in the last 2 years, or I guess really since the pandemic. I've really gotten back into it. And I love sports and things like that. So it's nice to have something different from gaming, kind of get you outside, active. So, albeit gaming, I love gaming, but there's not always time to do it. So I can't always get around to playing every single game that comes out. So I'm going to go through this list. This list isn't not in any particular order, just kind of written down some games. We'll talk through them, and then you can let me know what games you haven't played, or if you've played some of these games or haven't played some of them, let me know. Hit me up in the comments, and let's dive into it. So the first game on the list, a critical game that I haven't played, is Death Stranding. And I put this game on this list because, one, it's a Hideo Kojima game, and I love all the Metal Gear Solid games. I think those games are just phenomenal games. And Death Stranding is, his kind of new foray post Metal Gear Solid. And it's been an interesting game to kind of watch when it was coming out. And if you remember, this game came out in November of 2019. And one of the main reasons I never got to it is because that was a pretty busy time, not only in gaming, but for myself personally. I mean, that was shortly after my son was born, my first son. And so, busy with a newborn, that definitely cuts into your gaming time. And there were some other games that I was really into at the time that kind of kept me from Death Stranding. And a couple of those are Pokemon Sword and Shield came out in the same month. And I really wanted to, that was kind of my first foray getting back into Pokemon. So I really wanted to give that game a go. And then the PlayStation had the Medieval remaster that came out on PlayStation 4. And I had fond memories of that game. So I definitely spent some time playing through that. And then another big holiday game that came out that year was The Outer Worlds. And I played that on Xbox, and that was one I was super excited for, because again, it was like, oh, this is the Fallout successor we've been wanting. No thanks, Bethesda. So some big games that came out around that time. And I also think that was the same year that Gears 5 came out, which is pretty big. I remember playing that. That Ghostbusters remaster also came out earlier that year. So there was just a lot of games coming out in November, around that time. And so I just never got to Death Stranding. And I picked it up because I wanted to support him. I was excited for that game. But leading up to that release, I remember vividly that no one would shut up about that game. Like every event, every showcase had something about Death Stranding. And it got to the point, even like months before this game came out, where I was so sick and tired of hearing about Death Stranding. Like, I get it. It's Kojima. It's like, I don't need to see this game every other freaking time I'm looking at video games. Like, it was just so annoying. And that was one of the reasons it kind of turned me off from the game, but I still picked it up. I actually say my copy is still sealed from picking it up. But I do want to get to it because I've heard a lot of good things about it. Now I understand it's not a game for everyone, and it's certainly a unique game. I've avoided spoilers, so I don't know too much about it outside of, the trailers. And I've watched a little bit of gameplay, just like someone kind of traversing the land and stuff like that. But I don't really know how it all works and what the story is actually about. But it just looks fascinating. And knowing Kojima and what he did with Metal Gear Solid, I mean, you're in for a ride. But not only I mentioned other games coming out around that time, but also I've heard it's a long game. And looking it up, a great website, howlongtobeat.com. So if you ever want to, that's a website I use regularly looking games, because you get a good estimation about how long games are. And this one says it's about 59.5 hours to beat. And that's pretty lengthy. So I will get to it at some point and report out when I do, but nonetheless, that's the one I want to start out with, Death Stranding. Have not played it yet, but definitely want to. Now, this next game on this list, it will probably surprise a lot of folks, and it is slightly embarrassing because it's been so long and there's been so many versions of this game that you almost have no excuse. But nonetheless, I haven't played it, and that is Resident Evil 4. And this is often talked about as the best Resident Evil game, the one that changed the franchise forever. Even arguably changed survival horror forever. People, I don't know, just everyone gushes about Resident Evil 4, and I have just never played it. And I got to be honest, back in the day, I was never really into Resident Evil. Like the first full Resident Evil game I played, like all the way through, was Resident Evil 7. So I'm pretty new to this series. And I played 7. Obviously, I played 8, which I love 8. 8 is awesome. Like that was, such a good game. And then I've dabbled in the remake or remaster of the very first one, played a little bit of that. And I've played, I think, the Revelations spinoff. I played the first game of that. I actually got it on Switch, and I played that. And that's really it. But back in the day, I was more into Silent Hill. Silent Hill was the survival series that I was more into. So I played Silent Hill 2 and 3. Played Silent Hill Origins on the PSP, and so I was just more into Silent Hill than I ever got into Resident Evil. But nonetheless, I want to play Resident Evil 4 because, especially after the comparisons between Resident Evil 8 and Resident Evil 4, I know it's a game I'm going to like. And if you remember, so this game came about originally back on the GameCube in 2005, so it's been a long, long time. And it came to PS2, I think, a year later. And if you've never looked this up, it's got a very interesting history because this was part of the Capcom 5. And that was 5 exclusive games Capcom was going to do for the Nintendo GameCube that I think only 2 or 3 of those ever got released. And then obviously the big one was Resident Evil 4, but that one went multi-platform real quick and the Capcom 5 quickly died. But it's kind of a fascinating story, but nonetheless. And, albeit it came out way back in 2005, it's been ported multiple times to like every single console almost. So there's a Wii version, came to modern consoles with PS4, Xbox One, Switch, all that stuff. So really, you can play that game just about anywhere. And I do have it. I do have a PS4 version of it, and it's something I want to get to at some point, but I never got around to it back in the day. So Resident Evil 4. Haven't played it yet. Now, next on my list is Mario Galaxy 2. And I put this one on here because Mario Galaxy 2 is just heralded as like one of the greatest games of all time. Like people have they gushed about this game. And I remember it was getting 10s when it came out. It originally came back to the Wii in 2010 is when it originally came out. And I was just out of curiosity, I was like, I wonder what the Metacritic scores are. So it has a Metacritic score of 97, which is phenomenal. And then a user score of 9.1. So very, very good. And I even remember, I think one of my good friends back in the day had played it and said it was awesome. And I played a little bit of the first Mario Galaxy on the Wii. And I liked it, but after hearing so many good things about this game, I just like, okay, should probably play it. And I love Mario. I love Nintendo. I love Mario games. But during 2010 when that came out, I mean, dude, I was playing the likes. I was in a Call of Duty that was taking up my life. I think that's also the same year, if I'm not mistaken, New Vegas came out. So that was obviously taking up my time. I played, got into that game. So there were just other games that I was into at the time rather than playing, especially on the Wii. The Wii had some great games, don't get me wrong, but everyone was playing like Wii Sport. Like that's what you did with your Wii. You played Wii Sports. So I just never got around to it. But, knowing that this is Harold is, everyone considers this game just to be like one of the greatest. I got to do my due diligence and play it, so the crappy thing is physical copies are really hard to come by. So I would like to get a physical copy. I do have a physical copy of the first game. I just never picked up the second one. So hopefully I can get one for a semi-decent price. Worst case scenario, I believe I can still get it digitally before the Wii U shop closes. And then one interesting tidbit I did want to throw in here about Super Mario Galaxy 2 is it has over 7 million copies sold and is one of the best-selling games on the Wii. So not only did it get critic success, it got commercial success as well. Now, this next one on this list is another one like Resident Evil 4, where I think people might be a little shocked, but that is Knights of the Old Republic. Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic. This is a game I've never played. And this one originally came out in 2003 on the Xbox, and I'm pretty sure it was an Xbox exclusive along with its sequel. Developed by BioWare, the old BioWare team back when they were actually a good team making good RPGs. And it's just, back then I was on my Xbox, that was Halo. And I think I got my GameCube around that time too. And so I was playing, Metroid Prime, Zelda, Wind Waker, the likes of those games. So Knights of the Old Republic really wasn't my jam, but my little brother, he was super into RPGs, and he's a big RPG guy, and I know he's played those games and loves them. And you'd think with me being such a big Star Wars fan, I would have played those games, but it just wasn't my cup of tea at the time. I was more into like shooters and action games rather than RPGs. So I feel like I missed out on a big one because so many people talk about it. I know there's a big twist. I don't know what the twist is. Please don't tell me in the comments. But I know there's a big twist that I've managed to avoid all these years. And so it's funny because actually recently I bought it on sale on the Xbox store digitally on my Xbox Series X. And I had every intention of popping in until they recently announced the remake. So they're remaking this for the PS5 and the PC. It's going to be a PS5 console, timed exclusive, I believe, from Asper. And that team, looking that team up, they've done a bunch of other port work for older Star Wars games, like Republic Commando, The Force Unleashed, stuff like that. They're bringing those to kind of modern hardware, which I actually picked up a physical copy of the Duo pack. So it is Republic Commando and Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. It's just because I loved Episode 1 Racer back in the day on the Nintendo 64, and I've always wanted to play Republic Commando, so I was like, I'll just get the physical copy of this one. I got a good deal on it. But I digress there. So this is, I just never got around to this game, and I know it's heralded as like the best Star Wars game out there. Same with its sequel, and I know it was recently ported to Switch last year, and it's just again one of those games I just never got around to playing, but I definitely want to. And depending on how they handle this remake, like if it's changed too much, I'm just going to go back and play the original. Although I know the original these days is a little hard by today's standards to play, but I have to. I need to do myself a favor and get caught up there. And now this next game on this list is kind of an older one, going back to the Super Nintendo, and that's Earthbound. And this was originally released as Mother 2 in Japan back in 1994, came to the US in 1995. And I've never got around to playing this game. I remember seeing it in Blockbuster, that iconic box art with the robot alien on it. I just remember seeing it all the time. Very iconic as a kid. And I remember my friends talking about it. Like my friends were super into RPGs, especially on the NES and in PlayStation 1 back in the day. And I remember them talking about it, talking it up as as we were young kids back in the day, but I don't know, never got around to it. It wasn't really a game I was into trying back then. And years later, people still talk about it. They love it, and I've just never gone back to play it. But it's one of those games where, because people love it, it has that cult following, and people want Mother 3 back, because Mother 3 was never released in the US, and they or the West, I should say, and people want it. It's just I look at that game and I'm like, I really feel like I should go play that at some point. And the nice thing about it is it is on the Super Nintendo Classic, that mini console, if you have that. So I'm fortunate enough to do have one of those, so I do have access to the game whenever I find time to play it. But Earthbound, one I haven't played yet. Next game on the list is Castlevania Symphony of the Night, another throwback. And this game originally came out on the PlayStation 1 in 1997. And then later came to the Xbox 360 via the Xbox Live Arcade in 2006. And actually, I want to say some point last year, maybe it was the year before, this game was free on Xbox Live Gold. So I got it for free. So I have it on my Xbox waiting for me to play it. But it's, again, just one of those games, back in 1997, I wasn't really looking to play a Castlevania game. And really, throughout the years, I've never really been into Castlevania games. I've really only played the original on Nintendo, like way back in the day as a little kid. Didn't even know what I was playing at the time, but I loved it. And so, I think one of what makes this game on this list is because this game is considered the pioneer of the Metroidvania genre, a genre that I certainly enjoy, especially games, modern games, the likes of Hollow Knight and Dead Cells and stuff like that, where there's clear inspiration from Castlevania Symphony. And I think to a certain degree, when you talk about level design, when you talk about some of the Soulsborne games, I think you can certainly see that influence from a level design perspective. And this game really just defined that genre. It pioneered it, and kind of that's where the Vania in Metroidvania comes from. It's from Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And I mean, this game is heralded by some as like one of the best games ever created. And really the only gaming podcast I listen to, from Colin Moriarty, Sacred Symbols, he's a big Castlevania guy, and he says this game is amazing and everyone should play it. And I certainly want to. And so it's on the list. I want to play it. And a little fun fact when I was looking at some of the info about the game, is this game originally sold poorly, but over time it gained sales, and eventually became the sleeper hit at over 700,000 sold in the US and Japan. So again, it kind of had that late cult following, but did well later in life. So pretty cool. I want to play it, and the nice thing, I have access to it, so it's in the backlog. Next up on my list is a fun one, a little bit more recent, and that's Persona 4 Golden. And this is a game originally came out, I think, on PlayStation 2 in 2008. Then eventually the Golden version came to Vita, heralded as the greatest Vita game by many, in 2011. And I actually have right here with me a sealed copy of Persona 4 Golden on Vita. I got it when I eventually got my Vita years late. I was like, okay, everyone talks about this game, I got to get it. Persona 4 Golden. And that was back when, Vita games were decently priced and you could still get them. So I'm going to keep it sealed. Because I know that's going to be worth something someday. So, I don't know. Everyone just talks about this game and just how good it is. Heralded is like one of the greatest RPGs ever made. And even one of my best friends from high school just gushed about that game and is like, you got to play it. You got to play it. Like, it's so good. And I've just never gotten around to it. Because I know it's a super long game. After I've played Persona 5, that's my first entry into the Persona world of video games. And knowing how long that game is, it's very intimidating to go into Persona 4 Golden. Though I've heard, because it is designed for handhelds, you can kind of go in, maybe, do a couple days and then kind of hop out. So you can kind of do it at a smaller chunks and kind of at your own pace. So that's encouraging. But I loved Persona 5, so I think I'll love Persona 4 Golden. It's just a matter of finding time to play it, but that's another one. Haven't played. Now, moving on the list is really, it's 2 for 1, but I'm counting it as one, and that's Mass Effect 2 and 3. So I've played the first Mass Effect, and I played it back on the 360, but I never played 2 and 3. Just never, I don't know, I never got around to it. There were other games that I was playing, and I never got back into this franchise. And a lot of people love Mass Effect. The Mass Effect trilogy, like, just tons of people talk about it. Tons of people love it. And Mass Effect 2 came out back in 2010, which I was like elbow deep in Call of Duty and Halo back then. And then 3 came out 2 years later in 2012. I was still in Halo Call of Duty world, most likely. So I never got around to these games. And, I know 3 had the big controversial ending. Again, I've kind of avoided all spoilers for this franchise, this series, I guess I should say, over time, because I just avoid those things. But it's a game I really want to get into. I want to go back and play through these, because I really, the first Mass Effect, I did enjoy it, and it got to the point once the story started picking up towards the second half of the game, I just kind of plowed through that because I couldn't stop. It was just so good, and I know 2 and 3 are much better, albeit except for the ending of 3, from what I've heard. But knowing that these are big RPGs, I'm concerned about time spent and how long that's going to take me to beat them. But you know what? I actually looked up before recording the podcast how long it takes to beat these, and both of them are clocking in at about 35 and a half hours. And that's actually shorter than I thought. So I picked up over on a Black Friday deal this past holiday season, the Mass Effect trilogy on PS4. I picked that up. So I have every intention of going back and playing 2 and 3. It's just a matter of when. But haven't played them. It's on the backlog list. Moving on is another one that came out a while ago on the PS2, and that's Shadow of the Colossus. And this originally came out in 2005, and then Bluepoint remade it later. Bluepoint, now Sony owned. And they brought it over to the PS4 in 2018, which has been heralded as just a beautiful, superior version. And a lot of people make the argument this is like one of the best PlayStation 2 games. And a lot of people speak fondly of this. And it's one of those games where because I did eventually pick up the 2018 remake of Shadow of the Colossus. And it's one of those games where I kind of just look over at my shelf and I'm like, oh yeah, Shadow of the Colossus, I have that game. I should probably play that at some point. And I've never gotten around to it, but it looks really, really cool. And again, I've heard nothing but great things about it. So it's just it's just one of those games where a lot of people like it, seemingly. And I just kind of missed out at it. I missed out on it when it, debuted, and then I know it got remade, and it seems like it was remade very well, and just keeps kind of getting pushed farther and farther back in the backlog. But I do want to eventually play it because it does look really cool, and I think the concept of it sounds really interesting in terms of your character, and you're fighting these giant beasts and monsters and enemies, and it sounds really, really cool. And not knowing too much, kind of going in as blind as really one could be in this day and age, I think I'd have a good time with it. So we'll see when I can get to it. And lastly, rounding out my list is Ni no Kuni: Wrath of the White Witch. And this is a PS3 RPG that originally came out back in 2011 and was recently remastered in 2019, brought to at least Switch and PlayStation 4 and PC, I believe. And a lot of people say this is like one of the best RPGs in the PlayStation 3. And Colin Moriarty, who I mentioned earlier, host of Sacred Symbols, longtime video games journalist, if you may have heard of him, but he was one of the original champions of this game. Now, I remember when this game came out, and the first thing I noticed about it is its beautiful art style, this kind of very anime Ghibli art style, because I think the Studio Ghibli did the artwork for it, or at least one of their artists did, and it's just very iconic. Looks awesome, gorgeous. And I remember seeing it, and I was like, this game looks really interesting, but I'm kind of watching, it was like turn-based, it looked really slow, and I was like, I don't know if it's for me. But over the years, the more and more I hear and see about this game, I'm like, okay, maybe I do want to play it. And I think the interesting thing about it is it has creatures that you use in the battles, and it's almost like a Pokemon like kind of catch them in battle with them type system. So it's really, really interesting. Now I've played the second one, Ni no Kuni 2, the Revenant Kingdom, I think it is. I played that. I really enjoyed that game. And I liked that combat system because it was real time rather than turn based. And I think it's one of the reasons why I was more interested in that one. And that was a fun game. I enjoyed that one, definitely. I don't think there's really any ties to the first game, but same art style, same kind of universe, I believe. So knowing that and knowing how much I enjoyed the first one, or the second one, I mean, I just feel compelled to play this one. And knowing that so many people, say that this is a great RPG, knowing that some folks make the argument it's one of the best RPGs on the PlayStation 3, and I think that's saying something. This means I feel like I got to put some time into this one. I know it's a little bit of a longer game, so again, the time component comes in. Like when can I fit this into all the other games in my backlog and new and upcoming games. But nonetheless, I just really felt compelled to put this on the list because it's another one that's, anytime I hear about this game or I look over my shelf and I see it, I'm like, man, I really should get to playing that because it sounds cool. It does. And I've kind of turned face a little bit over the years with this game in terms of, kind of coming around to it. Be like, okay, yeah, maybe I would like it. So, Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch. And that'll have it. That's my list. 10 critical games I have yet to play. Let me know what you guys think about my list. Let me know if there's any games on your list that you would like to play but just have never gotten around to play that either are, has a critical success, commercial success, or is just one of those games that everyone talks about that you're just like, I should probably play this so I'm kind of know what people are saying and understand it. Let me know down in the comments below. Remember, the best way to support the podcast is to leave me comments, rate the show, leave ratings, do thumbs up on the YouTube, all that stuff. It helps out in the algorithms, helps out the show. I'd really appreciate it if you do. And subscribe. Subscribe to the podcast from whatever platform you like. That's always appreciated. Love to see you on there. And that'll do it for this week. So I hope you stay well. Hope you stay safe. Hope you get to play lots of video games out there. And until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.